How far can one go to poison their own brand, to alienate their own audience, before they start to realize that they might be the problem? Shad M. Brooks, also known as Shadiversity, is a YouTuber, self-published author, and self-proclaimed artist who, at the height of his popularity, was pulling in millions of views, but now struggles to get any more than 200,000, mostly on videos talking about his channel dying, and averaging about 50,000 views per video that is outside of that topic. Shad's summation as to why his views are declining so drastically is because he's being suppressed by the YouTube woke algorithm. But is that the case, or has he just lost mainstream appeal through his own actions, beliefs, and controversies? In this series, I am going to be talking about 3 key factors that I believe contributed to, if not are the sole responsibility, of Shad losing his audience. Starting with a subject that I personally am quite familiar with and have a vested interest in, that being Shad's takes on AI art. So without further ado, let's roll the intro and get into today's topic. My faith hadn't really aged because rage like this doesn't come without a few marks. So a little bit of a prelude before we begin to talk about why a SwordTuber would even talk about art in the first place on his channel. We must first discuss his brother Jazza and how Shad is incredibly insecure, especially when he is compared to his brother. Jazza is also a YouTuber, sitting at about 6.67 million subscribers at this time of recording, and is a professional artist. Shadiversity, for context, is sitting at about 1.66 million subscribers. But not only does Jazza's channel have far more subscribers than Shad's channel does, Jazza is consistently pulling in views that are well and above what Shad on average makes. In fact, Jazza averages views that are higher than the best performing videos that Shad is currently producing. Now the reason this becomes relevant is it is quite clear when you see Shad and Jazza interact with each other that Shad definitely has a chip on his shoulder. The most emblematic occurrence of this, of course, being the PAX event from 2016, where Shad and Jazza have a minor dispute about Shad's validity as an artist, in which, by the way, I would be remiss if I did not point out, Jazza does not dispute that Shad is an artist, rather to what degree of skill Shad is proficient in art. And while this was a minor part of the original thing they had planned to do, which was a live play event of some kind of tabletop role-playing system, it ended up being the only memorable part from this entire event.
This is professional. No, I'm not, but I think artistry should be at 2 and writers too.
Okay, I think
this
we
is my
need
honest
to decide.
opinions.
You can get 2 in writer.
Yeah, I'd agree with
published.
that. Thing is, no, I've had agents accept my work.
It's not the same.
No.
It isn't the same.
That is said with a huge amount of ignorance in regards to the publishing and writing industry.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
It is profoundly ignorant, that context.
Right. But the thing is, we gave him 2 on artist because it's his full-time job.
This has become a really loaded episode.
I'm not saying
we're
not
not even going to get to play.
I'm not saying your
my-
art
just
my
addressing
art
each other.
is
It's good.
Easily
It's
at a
good.
professional standard.
Yes.
And people have commissioned me. It's just
agreed.
I haven't chosen
But
to
Can I
use
say
it.
This is
though, that
vocation.
there are
This
a
is
lot
job.
of people who are at a professional standard who can't work as an artist.
Yeah, but we're talking about skill,
Like-
not, wanting to
Yeah, I
work.
know,
at it.
but like,
Joss, you need to be very honest
if you were to
about
get
my
to-
level
if I'm
as an
going to be
artist.
very honest, I love you. I'd say appointing artist.
Well, no, because then you should get a point first. We have our strengths and weaknesses, and you know what my strengths are in artistry, and
Now I do know I cut this video a little bit short. Do not worry, we will be revisiting it so you can get the full context later, but I just want to point out the fact that as soon as they mentioned that they gave Jazza a 2 in the art skill for this tabletop role-playing game, that Jazza immediately goes, "Hey guys, this language is getting a little loaded." And that's probably because Jazza knows more than anyone else at the table just how insecure Shad really is. Now let me pose a question to you. After watching this, if you had no context for either of these 2 people, Who would you say is the older brother, and who do you think is the petulant younger brother? If you thought Jazza was the older brother because he's far more mature, looks less disheveled than Shad does, and is far more reasonable in this clip, you would be wrong, but I would not fault you for that misunderstanding. I say this not to paint some kind of psychological profile for Shad M. Brooks, rather to point out the fact that his brother is far more well adapted to society and is far less emotionally unstable than he himself is. Jazz is even polite enough to acquiesce to Shad that he deserves 2 points in a writing skill, something that he seems to have done out of support for his brother more so than true belief in his writing skills, but nonetheless support for his brother. But when it comes to art, it is a very personal thing that he has a lot of knowledge on, since his entire career is based around the art he creates. And while I know, yes, art is fundamentally subjective, and to criticize any kind of art gets into a territory of opinion versus fact. That being said, as we will see in Shad's own words, he does not enjoy the process of creating. He does not fundamentally understand why one would take the time to create. And having this mindset has stunted Shad's growth as an artist to plateau at a certain level. This includes his AI-generated images that are made completely from prompts. Because of his lack of technical knowledge, he is generating images and art that he himself thinks is very high quality. But if you look past the thin veneer of gloss that the AI has put over his hand-drawn drawings and over his photoshopped Frankenstein creations, you will very plainly see that there are some very glaring issues to the things that Shad finds acceptable. Things that fall out of the scope of subjective categorization and fall into objective categorization, such as proportion, foreshortening, shading, highlighting, shot composition, and most glaringly of all, anatomy. These are all quantifiable, real metrics of which you could measure the quality of something being realistic or not. And Shad's lack of technical skill as an artist leaves these kinds of things as a blind spot that he is incapable of recognizing. And this will become readily apparent as we move on to our next part, analyzing a video he uploaded to his main channel called A Love Letter to AI Art. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I do believe it would be beneficial if I played the rest of a clip that I had cut short earlier, just so that you have context as to why I'm making the criticisms that I am about to make.
We have our strengths and weaknesses, and you know what my strengths are in artistry, and I'm easily at a professional standard.
I would be willing to give you 2 points in writer. I'll put it that way.
Art easily is on 2 points. I'm at a professional standard, and you know that. Your strengths are definitely in character expression, on facial expressions, and also in colouring and stuff like that. But the anatomy side of things, I think I do really well at.
Yeah, I
character
agree.
anatomy.
I guess in
and
terms
proportion specifically.
We don't need to sit on this.
A side note, but I find it hilarious that one guy is completely checked out and is on his phone during this event. The other guy is sitting on the sidelines, all while Jazz is being grilled by Shad, because even though Jazz is agreeing with Shad, I guess it's not genuine enough for Shad, so he's just like having a public meltdown about this. Like, Jazza, you gotta believe in your heart of hearts that I deserve it too. If you don't genuinely believe it, then, you know, it's meaningless to me. I want you to believe I deserve it too. I mean, the secondhand embarrassment I'm feeling watching this while editing it is just palpable. I could only imagine the sheer level of cringe that would be experiencing this without the filter of a screen. But to bring this back on track, the reason I show this isn't to just have light-hearted, meaningless commentary about what is arguably just an uncomfortable sibling moment. I want you all to remember that Shad says in his mind he is very good at anatomy. He claims this in his own words as his strength when it comes to art, to the point where he says that this distinguishes his art from his brother's art. Now, with all this groundwork laid out, I think it's finally time we move on to Shad's video, A Love Letter to AI Art, You Don't Need to Be Afraid. This pretentiously titled video has an equally pretentious introduction, with Shad saying that art has always been important to him, and ever since he was a child, he loved coming up with stories and characters and worlds. Further going on to explain that art has always been a tool that he felt helps him visualize these things that he likes to create. I've gone ahead and looped the drawings from the first 15 seconds here just to illustrate a point and build a foundation for which I am going to make the rest of my arguments off of. First, I would like to say that with Shad's hand-drawn artwork here, it is clear that he has a lot of potential, and if he truly wanted to improve and grow as an artist, he very well could. He just needs to put in the work, the time, and the effort. However, looking at this art, I wouldn't call him a master of anatomy, as in my mind, a master would be someone who has gone as far as they can within learning a subject and can no longer progress in any meaningful ways. And I say this not to chastise or deride or put down Shadiversity here, but as someone who has spent a lot of time both creating artwork and teaching others how to create artwork, I notice that Shad is falling into some of the tropes that come with visual bias that many artists experience, but especially beginners. That is to say that qualities in which an artist might find attractive or particularly of key interest sometimes get accidentally exaggerated or disproportionalized within an art piece, and this typically happens when you are tunnel visioning on a piece you are creating and not looking at the big picture, or another way to put it, missing the forest for the trees. Now, I'm not saying over-exaggeration is bad. In fact, I'm not even saying disproportionate character design is bad, because I'm arguably a disproportionately designed character. That being said, there is a difference between intentional character design and not understanding things like foreshortening, proportion, and anatomy. When Shad draws a woman with a very slim, extremely elongated, unrealistic waist, or men with inflated biceps and forearms that attach to elbows that are just wasp thin, it's not intentional character design. The bent out, crooked, hyperextended looking arms are not an intentional choice. Shad just does not have the technical knowledge to understand why that looks wrong. And another thing I would like to point out that you all might have noticed as this video has been on loop in the background of me talking, Shad does not stray far from the same few basic poses that he likes to draw. Now, you can draw whatever you want. It doesn't reflect on you as a person or you as an artist, but what I will say is a fear to branch out of the same pose or the same subject matter is somewhat of a sign that you are afraid to grow as an artist, or rather that you are afraid of the failure that comes with growing as an artist. It's clear to me that Shad has found a pose that he could reliably recreate over and over again with minor alterations, and he doesn't want to stray too far away from that base, because if he does, it won't feel as satisfactory. Shad states that art first became important to him due to his passion for drawing, a passion that he claims has followed him up until now, stating that he loves creating new characters and depicting the stories and worlds that he immerses himself with. And it would be at this point that most of you will start to realize he has not said a single thing he likes about art itself. Creating characters, writing stories, world building. None of these are key aspects of art itself. Art can certainly enhance these things, but this would fall more into the category of writing. You can argue that character design somewhat gets into concept art. That being said, the primary driving of a character is its personality and not just its design. And since Shad keeps specifically phrasing it as creating new characters, it's safe to say that he's not so much talking about the design aspect so much as the characterization process. Shad then goes on to say that he had a revelation later on in life that he did not enjoy the mechanical aspect of creating art, rather just the end product and the act of creating something itself. Now, if you work in an office team setting and you have that annoying boss who's the ideas guy but doesn't have any technical knowledge on how to make things work, so he forces you to figure it out, you might be getting chills and a weird feeling up your spine as Shad is describing his love of art. And by that I mean, having an idea is the easy part. In fact, dare I say, having an idea isn't even noteworthy. Practically everyone's having ideas all the time. Being able to take that idea and produce something from it that reflects what you had in your mind takes time, effort, and skill. Time and effort Shad readily admits in this video that he does not want to spend, and yet he wants to be taken seriously as an artist, to the extent that he is willing to publicly embarrass himself in a maladapted effort to prove he is a great artist. In other words, he wants all of the gratification that comes with being able to create art, and yet he doesn't want to put any effort into becoming a great artist, which in my opinion is a very lazy mindset. The way that Shad even describes the action of creating art sounds robotic and dispassionate.
It was a great revelation to me later on in life. It wasn't actually the physical, mechanical movement of drawing that I was actually enjoying, but it was the creation of something. There was some relaxation found in the methodical kind of movements of scraping a pencil along paper, but the true artistic satisfaction was in what I was creating. Otherwise, why wasn't I just drawing straight lines on a single piece of paper forever?
I can understand art being tedious, especially when you have a lot that you need to get done and not a lot of time to get it all done. I can even empathize with the idea that art is mentally or physically taxing at times in order to create. But reducing the act of drawing to moving a pencil across paper aimlessly sounds less like the thoughts of someone who enjoys and loves art, and more like the thoughts of someone who doesn't fundamentally understand art at its basic core. Shad says with his full chest that he didn't enjoy the act of drawing, but just his creations, as if this is some deep philosophical, nuanced position to take. But in reality, this is just a shallow observation of how everyone feels about creating things. Do you think writers enjoy the bullet point process of outlining? Do you think 3D modelers enjoy the process of rigging their creations so they can be smoothly animated? Everyone enjoys the end result more than the process, because the process it takes to get to the end result is work. Shad's greatest life revelation is something that most people figure out by the time they reach puberty. Shad goes on to talk about how he fell in love with writing as it was a medium in which he could explore his characters and worlds in further detail, going so far as to call himself a published author and showing his novel Shadow of a Conqueror on screen. However, I find it quite interesting and telling that Shad doesn't mention that it's a self-published novel. Now, I've only ever read passing snippets as I've been perusing the internet of this novel. However, from what I can gather, it's written in a very Wattpad style, she breasted boobily down the stairs kind of way. So if you want this lovely voice to read that horrible cringe, then I don't know, comment below. At this point, I've read so much awful shit for y'all's enjoyment anyways. What's a little more cringe on top of the pile gonna do to hurt me? Shad states that he loves tools that help elevate his art, for example, adding inked line art on top of his art in order to make it pop out on the page. However, and this is by far the most vulnerable and honest Shad has ever been in a video, he states that He fears the greater risk of smudges and permanently ruining artwork that comes with using things like ink. And I really do think that this is a window directly into the root of Shad's problems when it comes to art. The fear of failure. Now, there are a handful of ways to fix mistakes when inking something by hand. For example, the comic book industry swears by using things like liquid paper and whiteout in order to correct mistakes, but that's kind of a moot point. Shad states that his way around this obstacle was to convert his traditional sketched drawings into digital ones using a scanner. And I don't particularly like the framing he decided to go with on this, stating that he never considered digital artwork to be cheating when compared to traditional hand-inked artwork. Because for one, I already know he's going to use this as the basis to explain away his use of AI. But secondarily, because when you are the one creating digital art, it is still you who is in control. It is still your intentions that drive the piece forward. I started off as a traditional artist, mostly working with acrylic paints, but also doing a lot of pastels, charcoals, and even sketches using pencils. At a certain point, I then decided to fully focus on digital artwork creation, and now today I am practically strictly a digital artist. And while digital art does streamline a lot of things and make it far easier to create, whereas traditional physical art is sometimes more of a challenge, you still require the skill to realize the idea you have as you invest time into it. Shad states that digital art had allowed him to explore things like coloring his pieces, being able to ink his pieces, all without the stress and worry of using things like pastels or paints. And the fact that he calls things like the potential for mistakes when using pastels and paints stresses really sticks out to me. Shad tries to transition from this into talking about how AI is just another tool. It just streamlines creativity for you. In this instance, I do believe he is talking about AI-assisted art. However, he also uses these arguments when talking about fully generated images. He says some wishy-washy bullshit like, when you combine other abilities and techniques you cultivate from different mediums, it allows you to make the very best art with this technology. Which I gotta say, if this is the best art, I'm good. Yeah, this is the sales pitch in order to start using AI artwork in order to improve my art quality. It's not really selling it. Now, I really do not like putting other people's content in my videos wholesale, but I think the best way for me to convey to you exactly how I feel right now is by showing this next sequence completely unedited before I talk about it.
You to make the very best art with this technology. And I'm not kidding in this. I am an artist. I've developed a very keen eye for proportion and detail, and I have applied that in every artistic pursuit in whatever medium I'm using. There are many people who use AI art who have seen my images that I've made with this technology and have literally asked, how on earth do I produce these results? They see a difference in the quality that I'm able to achieve versus the quality that they have been able to achieve. And the answer is, I'm applying every single talent I've developed in multiple mediums in my pursuit and love of art to this medium as well.
Now, I have no evidence that people don't come up to Shad asking how he generates the images he does, but it's a little bit hard to take your word for it when you are insisting upon yourself this much and bragging about skills that you have while showing things like this. Because let's be strictly honest with ourselves here, there's nothing that distinguishes these images from any of the other AI slop images that are currently polluting the internet. In fact, there's very little that even distinguishes this digital waste from other images that Shad has produced. Shad has convinced himself that he is well and truly above and beyond those who also use AI art generation tools. He believes himself to have the best prompts or the best composition or the best technical knowledge that allow him to achieve something that is purely unique to himself. And yet, he's still just the ideas guy. He has no technical knowledge on how to actually bring his concepts to life. But instead of pawning this off on an underpaid artist who's supposed to somehow figure it all out, he is turning to an AI algorithm that does the best that it can with his half-sighted vision. And then, after all the heavy lifting was done, in order for Shad to feel like he really did something, that he really put his thumbprint right on this, and it's his, he makes minor alterations that, for the most part, make his wife look like she has a fucking large head. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, what if that's just a weird thing that the AI learning model decided to do when generating these images, and it was a mistake completely outside of Shad's influence? To that, I would say, oh, that's an interesting theory, but he includes a tutorial on how he generates images, and if you thought I was being uncharitable before, well, watch this.
This is looking pretty darn good. But there is a problem with the image, and once again, I wonder if you can notice it. Only someone who is familiar with anatomical proportions would be able to notice this. Her shoulders are far too wide to the rest of her frame. It makes her look way too bulky.
I'm sorry, quick side note before we continue, but I didn't add that dramatic pause there for comedic effect. That was just something Shad did on his own.
So we are going to fix these proportions with the Photoshop Liquify tool. Simple, subtle changes, but it actually has a very significant effect on the overall appearance and composition. The shoulders now look consistent with the rest of her frame, and overall she looks more feminine and delicate, which I personally like and is more accurate to my wife as well.
More accurate to your wife? What, is she an early to mid 2000s Airheads advertisement? What is this Mickey Mouse bullshit I see before my very eyes? Like, not to throw these words back in your face, Shad, but definitely to throw these words back in your face, Shad. Only someone who is familiar with anatomical proportions would be able to notice this. This, of course, being the hilariously Funko Pop proportioned head. He spends half the runtime of this video making minor alterations and throwing this back into the image generator to regenerate it like he's a gambling addict at a gacha game. Stitching and Frankensteining these clinical, lifeless, soulless pieces together into one thing that he kind of likes, and the only creative decision he chooses to make, the only thing that he actually guided himself without the AI taking over, is to purposefully make the already disproportionate image of his wife as Supergirl look even more disproportionate. And this is because Shad is not good at anatomy. He's not good at proportions. He's just not good. I'm not going to sugarcoat this and hold your hand while you have your man-baby fit about it like your brother Jazza would. These are not good. I see potential in your hand-drawn works for you to become a good artist. Maybe even a great artist. But I also see a lack of creativity, a lack of passion, and laziness. And so long as you have these qualities, you will never progress past this point. And to be quite frank, I think they were generous in giving you 1 point an artist. Following the release of this video, Shad received massive backlash, and rather than retracting his statements or listening to the disagreements to his arguments, he decided to double, triple, quadruple down until he made a 9-part series of videos defending AI on a separate channel entirely dedicated to it called Shad AI. Now, the videos on the Shad AI channel range in length from 2 minutes to up to 21 minutes, not including the 2.5 hour long debate stream that he did that I will not be covering. So I hope you can understand as to why I am not going to go frame by frame of every single one of these fucking videos just to respond to him. Rather, I will try my best to summarize the arguments he makes in each of his videos that are most prominent and respond thusly. But if that's not good enough for you, and you want me to spend 2.5 hours of my life watching Shad and a comic book artist debate the validity of AI art so that I could review it to you all, Get this video to 1,000 likes and I'll do it. Regardless, the first video posted to the Shad AI channel is one titled, "Is AI art trained on stolen art, or is it fair use?" Now, neither Shad nor I, as far as I can tell, are experts in the field of copyright law. However, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and challenge him on this. Shad's main argument as to why AI art should be considered fair use is that it saves such little data from the original works that it uses to train itself on. In fact, Shad's exact mindset seems to be that because the data that is stored from the original works is unrecognizable to people, that somehow makes it fair use. And honestly, I don't doubt him on his explanation of how this all works. I personally don't give that much of a shit about AI, so I don't know the mechanics of it, but I'll choose to take him at his word for this. But the caveat to the claim that this is unrecognizable is only considering if it's recognizable to people. The information stored is clearly still recognizable to the computer itself, and in his own video he demonstrates this by generating a copy of an image.
Can I please talk about overfitting, please? Anyways, overfitting is when a model spits out its own training data verbatim with little to no changes. It's not supposed to happen, but it can happen, and I don't know why nobody ever brings it up on either side of the AI debate, but it definitely exists. You can, in fact, get the original image from an AI model. It happens for a bunch of reasons. One is because the data set's too small, another is because the model has too many neuron connections, and another is when the model is trained for too long. I'm Buggy, by the way. I don't do commentary.
Thank you, Buggy, for making the journey all the way here to explain something that I have no knowledge about. I'm going to link all of your socials below, and there's a 2-for-1 special on mold at the food truck. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, I remember. Furthermore, if it's just saving small amounts of data that are completely irrelevant to how it generates things, then why do you need to save other people's artworks in the first place? Surely, if this technology was truly fully generative, and saving the original artworks was no different from an art student looking at reference images and practicing still lives, then to create, the AI wouldn't need this latent data from when it's training itself. The common misconception is that school is to teach you to memorize facts. This is wrong. When learning a subject or a new skill, you're not memorizing factoids. You are learning problem solving. Now, copyright law around AI is very gray. For example, the US Supreme Court has ruled that AI-generated images are not copyrightable without any human authorship. There is no guidelines to this, and each individual instance would have to be tried on a case-by-case basis to find out if it's valid or if it's not. That being said, I do not believe just tweaking things around using the liquify tool haphazardly really counts as transformative. And at the end of the day, only human beings can create copyrightable works. Tweaking an image that an AI learning model has created still doesn't give you copyright ownership of the works you created. At best, it's just fair use over public domain garbage. Shad's second video on this channel is titled, "The Biggest Lie About AI Art." I'm not gonna lie to you, I had to watch this video 3 times just to figure out what the big lie was that was hinted at in the title of the video. Shad begins the video by discussing people using AI in order to barely modify artists' work and then repost it as their own. He then talks about how artists claim that people are using AI to steal their art, and he desperately tries to draw the distinction that this is an issue with people who use AI, not the AI tools themselves, stating that the biggest lie about AI art is that by saying people are using AI generation to steal artwork, they are implying that people are using the primary generation method of typing in a prompt, and that in doing this, the developers of the app must have stored the artwork into the AI model. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure nobody in the history of ever has made that argument. Not because the point itself is stupid, it is, but more so because of the fact that that kind of train of thought is so windy and hard to follow that I'm pretty sure the only one who can even think that way is Shad M. Brooks. And I welcome you to prove me wrong that people have been saying this, but the 3 examples that you've shown of Twitter posts don't even back up your claim. And as BitterestBuggy pointed out, image generators are fully capable of reproducing images in their dataset with few minor alterations. So with overfitting being an issue, the blame does not fall squarely on the people who use AI art generators, but rather the tools themselves that generate the art. So the biggest lie that has ever been told about AI art is something that Shad imagined and then got outraged over. Which, after watching a few of his movie review LARPer sessions, seems par for the course on most of the things that Shad gets mad about. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, we can't be spoiling future episodes of this series. When one overestimates their talents, abilities, knowledge, or skill in a subject, that is defined as illusory superiority. The form of this you might be most familiar with is the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people of low skill oftentimes overestimate their abilities. And while I do believe Shad highly overestimates his abilities and accomplishments, I don't necessarily believe he is an example of a Dunning-Kruger effect. If anything, I just think he's a person of average competence that is highly narcissistic. In the next 3 videos on the Shad AI channel we will currently be discussing, I believe, are emblematic of this from both the content within the videos themselves as well as the titles. The first of which is a video titled, "This AI image is impossible to make with just a prompt." In this video, Shad challenges himself to make an image of his high school OC in a complex crouching pose with a realistic medieval longsword. And he spends the first 53 seconds of this video insisting upon himself that something like this could not be generated through just a prompt. And not only that, but that the image he generates in this video follows his intentionality and his vision. Which, to be entirely honest, I don't believe. There is no way that this is verbatim, detail for detail, the end result Shad had in mind when cobbling this thing together, and there are several reasons why. Now, I don't usually nitpick artworks and go through every single flaw, but the mistakes in this are something that no human would ever make. And let's start with what I think is the most glaring problem, the discontinuity of the background. As you can see highlighted here, this part behind the character's head does not match at all the rest of the background. And this might seem like a petty critique, but according to Shad, you can't generate this image without the unique artistic skills that he's cultivated over the years through different mediums. And the thing is, we see the point in the video in which this occurs, and Shad seems to be completely oblivious.
Especially since it looks like the camera is tilted on an angle which gives it a more dynamic look. We will then correct several details manually in Photoshop to guide the AI further. We increase the resolution to 2000 by 2000 pixels, which is now too large for my GPU to generate in whole, so I in-paint smaller sections to get more accurate control over the design and increase the details and find the designs I want. With a specific facial expression in mind, I tweak the prompt multiple times in between each generation to guide it towards the facial expression I'm after. Now I generate the torso and arms into a higher resolution and correct the head size.
Now, I don't know about you, but rolling the dice over and over again until you get a result that kind of fits what you want is not what I would call intentional design. And I'm pretty sure why the background gets affected the way it does. I think what happened was Shad drew his masking lines around his character's head, but because the hair was so wispy, it's a bit heavy around the edges, and that's because unless you zoom in and manually rotoscope, masking hair takes some effort. And since we know Shad is adverse to effort, it's likely that he just took the thickest brush setting to paint in his mask and didn't care about the background at all. And the issues permeate further than just skin deep with something innocuous like the arguably unimportant background art. I think one of the most glaring issues, one that you yourself even admit is a problem, is how AI image generators generate hands. When zoomed out, this might seem fine on the surface. However, only someone who's familiar with anatomical proportions would be able to notice this. That hand is backwards. Not only that, but the thumb is correct, and the rest of the hand is not. And this isn't a slip-up that Shad failed to quality control before he posted this. This is the result of Shad trying to fix this mistake that the AI made.
I separate the hands from the image and background. This is so I can generate them separately, and the AI can focus on them without getting warped or confused with other elements in the image. Once I generate better hands, I add them to the main image within Photoshop.
And look, Chad, I know you put a lot of effort in opening Clip Studio, importing generic models and posing them, and also using Photoshop to collage together something that you think is truly yours and unique. But for all your efforts, it still looks like poorly made AI slop. I'm not going to dwell on this image any longer. I feel like I've belabored the point, but a few more notable things. The head is still fucking gigantic, and the lighting does not make any sense whatsoever. Also, side note, Shad said he can't render anything over 2000 by 2000 pixels, and funnily enough, I'm drawn at 3216 by 5704 pixels. So my hot furry ass is literally too much for Shad's laptop to handle. The next video we will be talking about on the Shad AI channel, fucking kill me, is titled, "This AI image made people lose their minds." Seriously, not kidding. And it's pretty cringe. The premise of the video is that Shad had posted to Twitter an AI-generated image of his Sword Girl OC, stating that if AI art is so easy to make, then it should be no problem for others to be able to make images of their OC doing the same pose that Shad's character is doing, effectively challenging everyone on Twitter to prove that AI art is easy. What then proceeds is over 3 minutes of pure fucking cope. Now, even though Shad did challenge artists who don't like AI to use AI to recreate his image, the majority of artists decided to not do that. Shad then goes on to have a pity party for himself, sobbing about how artists were tearing apart his artwork for disingenuous reasons, and that if he had changed the method in which he created this piece, they wouldn't have been nearly as critical to him. To that I have to say, have you met the art community? They love to tear people down over the most minor or innocuous mistakes that might appear in a piece of work. That being said, the majority of the criticisms you've received are not even disingenuous. The first guy you even show says your image has no gravity, looks unnatural, don't even get me started on the anatomy. This is what you pick to brag with? It's trash. And quite frankly, he's right. There is no weight to the piece. The anatomy is garbage. One guy even went through the effort to highlight every single thing that makes this look unnatural and strange. Another person even goes in detail to explain how because the hand is rotated but the arms aren't, the lack of dynamic continuity makes the anatomy look completely incorrect. They even compare your AI image to your reference photo that you took of yourself. And the replies you got that weren't detailed or informative were just people making fun of you because you are a lolcow and it is fun to make fun of you. Just because people clowning on you is unsubstantial to the overall arguments you've made does not mean that it's disingenuous. People don't have to argue in good faith with you when your entire premise is already in bad faith. You made this video to be a therapy session between all of your sycophants and you as you try to cope with the fact that you got ratioed and you got ratioed hard. And I know you tried to scroll through these as fast as possible so that the average viewer who doesn't pause the video wouldn't be able to read these comments, so that they just take your word at face value that it's all just disingenuous artists criticizing it because it's AI. when in reality the most of it is people calling you an untalented waste of space, and the rest of it being fairly level-headed people explaining in detail why you are wrong. You are so delusional, Shad, that you actually said in your video that people using their artistic skill and knowledge to point out all of the flaws in your AI art means that you are somehow correct. Shut the fuck up, you fat sack of shit. I'm gonna skip over the video he made, which is a tutorial on how he created this image that broke Twitter, because quite frankly, it does not matter. The things Shad does in it are so minor and inconsequential for what is overall a pretty dog shit final product anyways, that I don't feel any need to really talk about him generating this Frankenstein garbage. The next video we will be discussing is titled How AI Art Can Be Protected by Copyright. And the opening argument Shad makes is that many people say AI art cannot be copyrighted because it is made by a machine. And in his words, this is because of a false equivalence made to a court case in which a monkey took a selfie using a photographer's camera, and it was found in court that the image was uncopyrightable because only humans can create copyrighted works. But is this truly a false equivalence fallacy as Shad has stated, or is it a little bit more nuanced than that? Shad would have you believe that in this comparison, the AI image generator wouldn't be the monkey taking the selfie, but rather, it would be the camera, the tool used in order to create. If the AI image generator is simply the camera, then all it is the medium through which the expression of the monkey, or in this case, Shad, flows through. A camera doesn't decide things like lighting, set dressing, environment. And even though it can have things like exposure, depth of field, and focal point changed, that requires human input in order to do so. The camera is not making decisions that are relative to the overall composition of a piece. The camera is merely a tool through which someone can use to express their vision. So can you truly say that about AI? Is AI the monkey, or is Shad the monkey? In truth, this is still legally not very clearly defined. The courts have ruled that in order for AI art to be copyrightable, it requires something known as human authorship. This is a purposefully vague and open to interpretation definition legally because in situations like this, in order to prove human authorship, you would have to try these on a case-by-case basis. And that's because these AI image generators are clearly taking creative liberties when they are generating images, even when they are generating from something that you yourself have made and uploaded to them. So it's not as much of a false equivalence fallacy as Shad would have you believe. And for a guy who calls out others for what he perceives to be disingenuous arguments, this is pretty disingenuous to just pretend that, oh, AI is just a tool like a camera or a paintbrush, when it's clearly not, and you know it's not the same. Shad even brings up in this video that he is aware that this is how AI art is being seen legally on the global stage right now, that it is a legally gray area and requires proof of human authorship in order for it to be considered to be copyrightable. He just kind of manically bumbles through talking about all of this, saying that, well, eventually the courts will give full copyright to whoever creates these AI-generated images because big corporations like Disney want to use this technology. To which I have to say, do you think that's a good argument to make as to why AI art should exist? Just because greedy corporations are going to use it to cut out skilled labor jobs? Here's what these tech bros don't tell you. AI is not profitable yet. In fact, it is hanging on by the potential future profits it could make. And if it turns out to be unprofitable, which it looks like it might be, the investors that are keeping AI art image generators afloat will pull out and the whole thing will crash. And even if it is seen as profitable, you think that just because Disney wants to increase its profit margins, this will become legally permissible? Or even at the baseline, morally and ethically okay? Shad tries to claim that all AI art is misclassified and should be called AI-assisted art. I say let's take it a step further. Instead of calling it AI art or AI-assisted art, let's call it what it really is, AI trash. Or if we're being really honest, AI wage theft. Since that's the end result in Shad's perfect world, right? Disney starts using AI entirely to generate their movies, completely removing the art aspect of animation, and we all just live in a nightmare world where everything is literally recycled from what came before. And it's obvious to everyone in this video, Shad, that you are just spinning out. You're stumbling through sentences, you're fidgety, it's clear that you're arguing in bad faith. So much of this video is spent with you being an incoherent mess, and it feels like you're trying to convince yourself that AI is the camera more than you're trying to convince us. Like, if you want to talk about false equivalence fallacies, you're talking about people who make art by swinging a bucket over a suspended canvas and using the pendulum to create the piece, as if that is the exact same level of intentionality and effort as you clicking a button. Conveniently ignoring the fact that he's the one who built the canvas, he set this up, and it is his vision that is directly guiding the creative choices in the piece, unlike AI art. You want to talk about disingenuous, you drop-pie-faced motherfucker? Who the fuck are you to sit in your fat brigandine ass all day typing in prompts into a little fucking algorithm spitting out garbage to say that other people who put effort into their works are somehow on the same level as your greased-up sausage fingers clicking generate? Get fucked. And if you think that I'm misrepresenting your points, let me play the unedited full clip of what I just fucking showed.
You would even try and argue that the human didn't make it. I actually think, yeah, the human absolutely is the one making the image. They're the one clicking, being the cause of creation. The analogy that I used to take us through that I think is apt. There is a type of art that people make, and I've seen it, right, where they hang like a pen or something on a piece of string. It's like on a pendulum, and they have the image on a piece of paper, and then they simply push the pendulum to swing, and as it swings, it draws, okay? Who's really creating the image? All they did was push the pendulum, and then the system runs according to the way that it was set up, and it results in an image. And then the person that made the initial push, they're considered the creator of that image, they own it, and they do, and they have all rights over it. People might say, this is a false equivalence because they're the ones who set up the mechanics to have the pendulum on the string, and they're the ones that put it in the right way and push it in the right way so it swings in the right way to get the pattern they want. That's so analogous to AI art generation.
Oh, sorry, Sweaty, but it's not. I know you wanted it to be, but it's just not the same. You pushing the button on a machine that makes all the creative choices for you is not the same as someone using unique and interesting techniques to create art using nothing more than physics. And this is ultimately the core of the issue of what human authorship is. It has nothing to do with how much involvement a person had on an AI-generated piece, and it has everything to do with who is driving the creative decisions forward. And as for this example, I don't think Shad's the camera or the monkey. I think he's just the photographer trying to copyright something he didn't make. Well, Shad, I'd be lying if I said this was fun for me. But don't think I'm done with you just yet. Oh no, this was just the preliminary pool. There is still so much I have to discuss. But at this juncture in time, I feel it is best if we depart from the subject of your defense of AI art. But before we conclude things here, I have a little challenge of my own for you to complete. If AI is really not the one that is the driving creative force behind your artwork, Shad, if your unique vision is truly what is required in order for you to get the results that you want, prove it. This is Motakoa. Motakoa is a character from a card game I have been developing behind the scenes with several art friends of mine, including Buggy from this very video. It took 7 hours and 49 minutes for me to draw the entirety of Motakoa. If AI is everything you say it is, then recreate this, but instead of Motakoa, have your Sword Girl OC in the picture. Now, we can't make it too easy. The AI would be worthless if it does it slower than I can. So let's say if it can recreate this image but with your Sword Girl OC within 8 hours, then I will acquiesce to your point that AI is creator driven and just requires really strong vision. But if it can't, then you must admit, at least to yourself, that it's not another tool. It's not the camera. It's not the brush. Record yourself recreating this exact image but with your Sword Girl to prove me wrong. Do it on a live stream even if you feel confident enough. The Google Drive to the full-size image will be linked in the description down below for anyone who wants to attempt this challenge. But with that aspidocalone amount of things out of the way, my name's Undead. That's all I got. Stay with